All right, we are live. Hi, Denise. How are you?
Good. How are you, Trevor?
Good. Well, welcome to I call this the Trevor Roberts Talk Fest podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest tonight. I'm very excited to have you.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's always great
Yes,
to talk with you, see your smiling face.
you too. It's always great to see you. I hope I get to see you later this year in October at the event that we always bump into each other at.
I hope so
Um,
too.
yes, I do. Um, we have known each other for about 2 years, and we seem to we only get to hang out at that event really, but um, it's just been like the last two times I felt like, and I told you this last time we talked, that really comfortable with our connection and only meeting each other twice, and it felt really safe and like we can talk about anything. And both of the last two times we met, I knew I wanted to ask if you would be willing to come on. And then I did ask, and you said, yeah. So, which was really exciting for me. I know we have some fun topics to talk about, but is there anything what did you think about coming on to the podcast? Or have you thought about it since I first brought it up, or what do you think about it?
Well, I did. Yes, when you first brought it up, I was in Italy and said, okay, as soon as I get home, yes, I want to do this. And I listened to some of your other guests. And then I thought, well, I don't want to listen too much. I start getting intimidated. And then as it got closer, I start getting a little nervous, like, oh,
Oh.
I have so little stress in my life. It's like, oh,
Is that a good feeling, like to add some stress in, or are you like, no, this isn't what I thought it was going to be?
oh, it's mixed, but I'm definitely having a good time. And like I said, it's always great to see you. But I did honestly have some jitters.
Oh well, I still get jitters right before I hit start every time, so I get it.
Okay,
But
okay.
luckily, nothing is set in stone, so I wouldn't worry at all about it. And I think it's going to be a fantastic episode. I'm very grateful that you are taking the time to come on. So thank
Oh, well,
you.
thank you.
I thought we could just start off with your trip to Italy. And like you said, I reached out and you were in Italy. Italy is a special place to me, and I don't want to make it about me, but I just went there on a trip that was related to my honeymoon, and I've been a few places. So when you said that, I was like taking myself back to some of those memories, which was in 2018. And an amazing place where the people are so kind and the food is so good. So I'm curious, where did you go? I intentionally didn't want to ask you about the trip until now.
Right,
So
right. We haven't talked about it.
yeah. So how was your time there? Like, what was the occasion? Was it just you wanted to go, and what did you do?
Yeah, well, it was great. So, what brought this on was my nephew decided to have a destination wedding. He and his girlfriend, they live in Los Angeles. It's where they grew up, but they decided they'd get married in Tuscany. So, it
Oh,
was so great that most all of my family was able to go be there, spend some time together. So I just felt so lucky. My sister, my uncles, and all of our spouses, my cousin, my niece, well, and of course my nephew, we got to all go hang out, take a tour of San Gimignano, uh, spent some time in Rome together. And my brother-in-law, he speaks Italian. Just he has some Italian heritage, but hasn't. Well, he did live there actually. He had a grant to go study architecture as a young man, so he did live there for
okay.
a year or so. And he rented a nine person van, hauled us around, driving out of Rome. It's like, oh my gosh, I would not want to drive in Rome, let alone a nine-person van. So he drove us to the out into the country, and we stayed for a while out in the countryside in the Chianti area, and then went on to Tuscany to a little town called Asciano. It's right outside of Siena, and they got married at the Borgo Casabianca.
I just
Beautiful
want to
spot.
pronounce all these words.
I know, right? And we all felt like we were in a movie set. It was just beautiful. I think they had somewhere like 60, 70 guests, something like that. So mix of friends from high school because my nephew and his now wife went to high school together. And so they had friends from high school, from college, and of course, both sides of the family. So it was really special. And so that's what started it. But then we actually afterwards, well, so to back up a little bit, it was part of a bigger trip of about 4 months. We spent
Okay.
about 3 weeks in England, and my husband hiked the South Downs Way, which is this 100-mile hike kind of in southern England, basically from from the Brighton Eastbourne area over to near Southampton. uh, Winchester, I think, is where we ended up. So he would hike like 8 to 15 miles a day, and I would try to patch together buses, trains, Ubers from village to village. He actually did all the work in telling me how to get, he did all this research. So that was fun. We'd meet up each night and stay in a little pub. And then from there, we took a ferry over to uh, Guernsey, and that was good. Other than we learned my husband really needs to take his seasick medication on any time we go. Um, and then we spent 6 weeks in Brittany in Dinard, which is right across from Saint Malo. More people are familiar with Saint Malo or Saint Malo. There is a recent novel, I think it's called All the Things We Cannot See, something like
Yeah.
that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was based in Saint Malo. So we spent 6 weeks there, and that's when we then started traveling to Italy, spent a couple nights in Brig, Switzerland, spent a couple nights in Milan, and then went to Rome and Tuscany. And then after the wedding, we spent a month in a seaside town called Tropea. So it's down below the Amalfi Coast, right before you get to Sicily, Reggio Calabria. So
Wow.
anyway, yeah, our place, it was simple, but location, location, location. It's built on top of a cliff, and you just look out. I don't know how old it was. I tried to find some history on I found it on Airbnb, but you look out and there's the blue Mediterranean, kind of a part of the Mediterranean, but the Tyrrhenian Sea. Just gorgeous, just absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful weather. The sea was a little bit brisk at first, but it got warmer, when we left in mid-June. And then we went up to Naples at the end of it and flew home from Naples. So that was it. Back to
Oh,
Portland, Oregon, where the sun was shining here too. So I was like, oh, thank goodness, because that's really tough for me if I go from sunshine to June gloom in Oregon.
of course, yeah, and it feels like we're already back to the fall here in the Pacific Northwest, at
Right.
least the last couple of days. But wow, I had no idea that it was a 4 month long trip. I feel like you're just totally on this like once in a lifetime trip. I
I
mean,
know. It was great. It was really great. And we could stay longer because it included the UK. So the Schengen area, you can only stay without a visa anyway for up to 90 days. So the Schengen area, it's from this agreement, the Schengen agreement, wherever Schengen is, where
yeah,
all
what
these
is that?
countries, they all decided that you don't need visas to go back and forth between these countries, but as an American, you can only stay up to 90 days. So it includes uh, Germany, France, Italy, now Croatia. It didn't used to include Croatia. Uh, I'm not sure what all the other countries are, Spain, Portugal. So, all the major Western European countries. So we stayed right up to the 90th day and then got booted out. But the UK is not part of that. I mean, now they're not part of the EU either, but I don't think that that's what made the difference. I think it's they were never part of the Schengen. So I think you can go to the UK, and I'm not sure, maybe stay 3 to 6 months. I forget exactly. But anyway, so that's why we we needed to come home, but it also was helpful to be able to go early because I was scouring the prices
Hmm.
and for airline tickets, and it's much cheaper to go in February than it is to go in May. So we got some, I think, pretty good deals on our airfare.
This sounds like an amazing trip. I mean, is this something that you've done before, or did it kind of all come together, or was this like an amazing lifetime trip for you? Or, I mean, I don't.
Well,
We haven't
all of
talked
the
about it, but
Yeah, all of the above. Hopefully, there's more in my future. I already just booked last week a 7 day Mediterranean cruise, so hopefully we'll be able to make that part of a bigger trip. That's in September of next year, so it'll be a fall trip instead of a spring trip. Um, and then 2 years ago, we went to France, mostly France, and stayed in one Airbnb for 6 weeks in Cassis on the Mediterranean in Provence. So there is some precedent. I think, one of the biggest expenses to getting over there is the airfare. And
yeah,
so once you're there, and the other thing that I found out is that on many Airbnbs, they give you a discount if you stay for at least 28 days. So, as my mother taught me, my mother who's in the background there, the more you spend, the more you save. So I was embracing that.
I got to
And
write that down.
but yeah, I mean, when we went a couple years ago to stay in Cassis for 6 weeks, it was, I want to say, like $2,800 for the whole time for our lodging. And so, to be in a little village and right next to the sea, 5 minute walk, that was pretty sweet.
Okay, so I want to go back to your husband doing this 100-mile hike in England. So
Yeah,
so he would go out and do like 8 or 9 miles, and then he'd be. It was 100 miles, almost like continuous. So he's doing 8 or 9 miles, and then sleeping in a different town than the
right,
night than where he woke up. And
right.
every day you're like following along, kind of a thing.
Right, right. So I had initially thought, well, maybe on one of his shorter days, like an 8 mile day, I'll hike with him. And that was also one of the days that it was harder to piece together transportation. But I broke one of my golden rules. I, Pack light, pack light, pack light. I did not pack light. So I was carrying about 30 pounds, and I like to travel with a backpack instead of a wheelie roller because, there's cobblestones and
Hmm.
trying to hoist it up onto the train. So anyway, I had a backpack and not a very comfortable backpack at that, and was carrying about 30 pounds. So uh, it was even just to walk like for 15 minutes. I'm like, ow, oh, oh. So, okay, there's no way I'm going to want to do 8 miles. So
Is he
I
a
didn't
big
do that.
hiker? Like this was a major bucket list achievement kind of a thing, or was it just for fun?
I think so. He refuses to have a DNA test, but I believe he must be part mountain goat. So he loves it. And he has done some of these other hikes as well. Up in Scotland, he did what's known as the Speyside Trail. And with that one, you got to stop at little distilleries for have a single malt along the way. And he did that one on his own because at that point I was still working, he was not working, and
Okay.
so we did it as part of a bigger trip. I think um, it might have been when we went to Iceland as well. But at any rate, so he did the Speyside and he also did the Cotswolds. through the UK. And it's interesting walking through the UK. They have a like a right to roam. And so you're walking through somebody's sheep field or something, and you just have to know you've closed the gate behind you, or there's these different gate systems for the animals. And in fact, in one town, I got to the our lodging, like an old 400-year-old pub, and I thought, oh, well, I'll walk and meet him because there's only one path to get to where he I knew he was coming from. So I walk, and he had told me that he was at a little pub in a neighboring village, so I knew if he wasn't there, I had missed him. So anyway, I go there, and I missed him. He knew he could walk through the sheep field. I didn't know I could walk through the sheep field, so I was on the road, and he, yeah,
Okay.
we passed right by each other. So there's just big walkers. In fact, when I was talking to an elderly couple, I don't know how old they were, 80 and maybe older. They're just these tiny little European looking couple, I guess English, but they had their wellies on and it's all wet and muddy. And I asked them, how would I get to the path to the South Downs Way? Because I was planning on, once again, trying to meet my husband. And they said, oh, it's up that way. So I needed to follow them back. I could not keep up with this couple. I could not walk as
Wow.
fast as them. So I mean, they're just a country of avid walkers and
Yeah.
walkers they can walk through things. My husband said it was a little bit disconcerting. Like sometimes you're walking through a cow pasture and there's these
Yeah.
cattle staring at you and they're big.
They're huge. You don't know what they might do.
Right, right. So it's like, okay, just not doing anything here, just looking straight ahead. But oh, he really enjoys it.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And very impressive. I mean, I don't think I could do a 100-mile hike. Like I've done like 2 miles out, 2 miles back, and been really sore the next day. Then
Oh,
I
right.
so
Yes, me too.
um, that I mean, that's super cool. I'm gonna look up these hikes and just kind of see what they're all about. But I could see how if you're into it, there's like a community, and then like you learn about other big hikes, and you probably see people on the trails. So that would be pretty cool.
Right. He did run into a few people, and I was at a bookshop in Brighton or Eastbourne, I guess it was, and talked with the lady who was running it, and I was buying a South Downs Way book that I thought he might enjoy. And she said, oh, I did that, pre-internet era. She said she didn't even know how she put it all together. Like, so now, of course, you can kind of plan it from your living room, just going on the
Right.
internet. And there's, with the South Downs Way, there wasn't as much information as maybe with some of the others. But again, I listened to a podcast that was kind of interesting to hear somebody else's perspective. A lot of people do the South Downs Way starting from Winchester and then head to Eastbourne, but he did it in what some people think of as the reverse. We started in Eastbourne and
Okay.
went to Winchester, and he took a couple days off in between. We stayed in a town, might have been called Alfriston, but at any rate, so he had a little bit of a rest.
So when you look at this trip with England, Brittany, all of Italy, and then even if you throw in like your trip to France, do you have any like favorite part of Europe that you've been to, or even throw in Iceland? I mean, is there something that you
Oh,
love?
yeah, I really did love Iceland. We were just there for maybe we did it as part of a stopover because Iceland Air had a special as a stopover going to England, I want to say, and it was actually cheaper if we stopped in Iceland, cheaper airfare anyway, to stop in Iceland and then go on than if we just flew straight through to the UK. So go figure. But like I said, think of the money you'll save, as my mother would always say. So, yep, we saved on airfare and spent, I guess, it was probably just 6 days in Iceland, but I could have stayed for longer. And in fact, I'm having a lunch with a friend next week who just got back from, I think, a 2 week, maybe 3 week stay. And she rented like a motorhome and drove all the way around Iceland. So I'm looking forward to hearing what her experience was like. But it's just so gorgeous. So I don't usually think in terms of superlatives, just because I don't know. I like it all. But when you said Iceland, it's like, oh yeah, that really was very special.
Are you into the food, or do you just take it or leave it? Like, I mean, do you get excited about that, or do you just eat whatever?
I do. I love food. My husband is not such a foodie, and sometimes so he's in earshot, but he knows that I would say this about him. um, yeah, if we go, he'll be looking at the menu. Looks kind of double digit, and it's kind of like, okay, could you just pretend you're enjoying it, or so if I want to go out for a really nice meal, I'll go out with family or a girlfriend. Yeah, oh, he's not the person to go out for a super fancy meal together. But that said, like in Iceland, we were staying at a place where in somebody's driveway they had a food truck selling fresh fish. So we got some fish and chips there, and that was fun just to be able to eat fresh fish and chips right there. And then when we were in Brittany, I will say he makes a special effort to try to eat like what a region is known for.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, like, he'll surprise me. Like, we went to Philadelphia, and even though he eats mostly as a vegetarian, he's ordering a Philly cheesesteak sandwich. Like, what are you doing? Well, we're in Philadelphia. That's what you do. Go to Texas, it gets a barbecue. It's like, that's what you
Okay.
do. Okay. So, yeah, when we were in Brittany, what they're known for are some crepes or galettes, and they're made with buckwheat, and they're savory generally, or you could have uh, they have sweet dessert crepes as well, but these buckwheat crepes that are savory, that might have cheese or egg or vegetables or meat. Anyway, they're known for that, and then you have it with not a cup or glass of cider, you have it with a bowl of cider. So basically, you're drinking it out of this great big kind of cereal bowl, coffee cup sort of thing. So he did find a place in a neighboring little town, St. Enogat, and we went and had a very lovely lunch with these galettes and cider. It's like, oh, so that was fun. And then we went to Cancale, also nearby uh, in Brittany, and that's the oyster capital. There's
Oh wow.
these
Okay.
huge tides in Brittany. I mean, it goes out 100 yards, and it would just be the mud that's like you're looking at the ocean floor. And so they have the oyster beds out there. And the first time we went to Cancale, it was low tide, and there's all these tractors driving out into the low tide oyster beds. Some of it was on a little, there you could see a little bit of water, but for the most part, and they had these like kind of platforms that they could drive on as well. So they're out there tending the oyster beds. And then the next time we went out there, it was high tide. It's like you would it's just amazing. Like you look out, you don't see any oyster beds. Of course, there's no tractors because it's the water.
It's
So
like
anyway, we
totally
went
covered.
there. Yeah, yeah. So because we were in Oysterland, we had to get some oysters. I'm not a big oyster person. I've never seen him eat an oyster, but we each had at least a few oysters, and they had two kinds. I think one's called a flat oyster, which is indigenous to the area, but it had almost gotten wiped out, and then they imported from the U.S. And started growing, I believe, called rock oyster. And so with those, you put lemon on them, and I did prefer that one. But that was fun to go up to the lady, try to speak French and ask her about it, and she just shucks them right there, puts them on the shell, gives you the lemon. She only put lemon on these, don't put lemon on these, and then you throw them your oyster shells in this huge pile right there on the beach. It's just piled up with all these, decades of oyster shells. So that was pretty special.
Oh, seriously? They're just like decades of oyster shells just right there?
Well, I don't know how. I mean, how long does it like take to create a pile of oyster shells that's like 5 feet? So I'm just guessing. I mean, I don't know. They're just all over. It's just that there was a like a picnic bench, and then you could see right there down on the beach this pile of oyster shells.
Well, yeah, they're pretty rock solid. Like we have them up here too by the Hood Canal, and I don't know what you do with the shells. Like I don't know if I guess you just throw them away, but I don't know. Maybe you
Yeah.
just make a giant pile on the beach and it's like an attraction or something.
Well, I do remember one time that actually my ex-husband, who uh, liked to cook, he was making oysters and wanted to have them on the half shell. But where he bought the oysters locally, they didn't sell them with the shell; they just sold the oysters. So I think we went and like tried to buy separately a bag of oyster shells. So yeah, there's a market for oyster shells, I suppose.
So weird. Um, well, it sounds like an incredible trip. I can't imagine going to Europe for 4 months and just traveling around. Like that had to have been so much fun. And I'm sure you like. Did you rent? Did you fly when you? How did you get from England to Brittany?
uh, on a ferry. We took a ferry to Guernsey, and then we took a ferry from Guernsey to Saint Malo. So it's the English Channel there.
Yeah.
It's not
Did
too
you?
great of a distance. It was an overnight ferry that we took to get to Guernsey, and then the other ferry to get from Guernsey to mainland France was, oh, I don't know, 2 3 hours. It wasn't very long.
Then you took a train.
And then we actually, and this again, it was all researched out by my husband from Saint Malo. Dinan is just like the next little town. So he had scoped out what bus to take. I have to show you, I know it won't come through on the podcast, but this very detailed list, 4 page long. My husband researched like every bus that you need to take, the backup bus, if that one doesn't come, what time it is, what the number is, how much the bus is going to cost you. So that makes things a lot easier, because otherwise you land someplace and you're like, okay, now what do I do? And
I
so
love that he
we
does
didn't
that.
have very much downtime at all. But yeah. But
Is
do
that
you
I do that? Do you is that something you appreciate?
I do, although then he's like, this can't be happening. When I was meeting him in village to village, I just pull up Google, and Google will tell you how to get to someplace on public transit. I mean, it may or may not be right, but it's often quite reliable. And I'd be like, oh, I think I'll do this one instead. He's like, I don't recommend that. But so I did want to do it my way on one point in England. I missed the bus. I was talking to people asking, does the bus come by? Does the bus come by here? And this man says, well, I don't know, but I live right down the road and I know it stops at the next stop. I'll show you where it is. Very sweet gentleman. He was out doing his grocery shopping. So he walks me up to the bus stop, and then just before we could catch it, the bus flies by. So it's like he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So then he walked me all through the village and took me to the next bus stop where he said, you can wait here in the middle of town where there's more to do. And so even things like that, when things go wrong, I think, oh, how special was that? Like it restores your faith in humanity that this
Yeah.
man out doing his grocery shopping would just take this hapless American around and show her the various bus stops. So anyway,
Yeah.
but so we had I done it to Glenn's plan, I wouldn't have kept him waiting at the end of the day where we were meeting up at the pub, but I did keep him waiting that day.
Well, he was at the pub, so hopefully he was doing all right.
Hopefully he was doing okay. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have time? Do you want to share with me where you went to Italy? I want to know
Oh,
where you
well,
went.
very briefly, I can say we flew into Rome, and we travel in Europe with our friends that live in Paris. So we've only done 2 trips. They were both about 3.5 weeks, and both of them, the whole time, we were with our friends. And he is from France, so he's French. She did a study abroad and lived there for about 7 or 8 years, and then now they live in Tacoma, or no, they live in Gig Harbor,
Oh,
which is why we kind of came out here, just to be close to them,
right.
among other
Nice.
reasons. My wife would probably not. She would say we came out here because we like it, but I think that kind of helped. Um, But they met us. It was for our honeymoon. They came into Rome. So the night we flew in, we were in the Airbnb for a few hours, and then they showed up. And we did the Vatican City. Um, we did the Colosseum and that area next to the Colosseum where you see the giant stuff. And then we did Siena and kind of the Tuscany area. We did this really cool wine tour. We got to see their vineyard and try their wine and their food. I think there was a town called Vagliona or something. It was near Siena. Then we went over to Bologna and Verona. Bologna was really cool because it was like all made out of this red clay. So it was just like this red city. And Verona is the Romeo and Juliet city. And so it was cool. It had this mini Colosseum that was still big, but it was more intact. Didn't have the as much ruins. But we walked around the cities. We would essentially arrive, do some nighttime stuff, and then the next day be on our way. But we were bouncing a little bit. We did 3 days in Venice, and we did the little canoe tour thing with my wife and I. And we went under the bridge that you're supposed to. If you go underneath of it, you're in love forever.
Oh,
Um, Venice was one of my favorites. I mean, it was so cool, and I love all
yeah,
the history. Like Venice has, it's I don't know, I don't remember all of the details, but it wasn't always an Italian city, I don't think, and they kind of conquered other places and brought their artifacts back to Venice. So there was some cool stuff there. Then we drove. We rented a car, by the way. And one of the funniest things about renting the car was their cars are so small there.
right.
Um, my French friend Guillaume, he argued with the person. He doesn't speak Italian, but he kind of could, and he does speak French. So they were arguing. I'm just standing there, and eventually he looks over at me and he's like, "The car that they're giving us is smaller than what I reserved online." So we get back to our Airbnb and we put all of our luggage in, and there's just no way it will fit.
Oh my gosh.
And we tried it, like we tried rearranging, we tried putting stuff in the car, like up by our feet and in between us, and we were like, how can we make this work, But we just really couldn't. He was the driver, his wife was in the passenger seat, and Alex and I are in the back. And eventually we realized that there's like this cover that goes over the spare tire in the trunk. And if you take that out, you get a couple more inches. So we did that, and then we did get it to fit, but now we have this like cover, and we can't leave it behind. It's a rental
Right.
car. So we end up putting this cover inside the car, up and down, and in between, but it would go all the way up to the front and
Oh
touch the
my
window.
gosh.
and all the
Right.
way to the back, and it'd be like
Oh my God.
leaning on you.
That
And
can't
like,
be good visibility for the driver.
no, I mean, if you think about it, it was just like he couldn't really look to the right, but he could see forward,
All
you
right,
know.
right. Oh my gosh.
But like his wife didn't want it leaning on her, so she would always push it over, and then it would be leaning on him. And he's such a nice guy that he just accepted that. She's like, no, it's not leaning on me, and I was always behind him, so it was always leaning on me. And I'd like be looking around the corner at my wife, and I'd be throwing
Oh.
whatever at her. But I mean, for 3.5 weeks, every time we got in the car, and there was this alcohol bag that we'd buy like whiskey and limoncello and whatever. We started to accumulate alcohol. I think we
Right.
bought Campari and some wine. We were making Aperol spritz and stuff. And so, but like everyone put their little book bag in front of their feet, but the alcohol bag was a shared item and no one knew where to put it. So every time I'd get out of the car, I'd like put it in the front seat by her feet, And then next time I would get back in the car, somehow it would be like in my feet,
Oh,
because
that's so
nobody,
funny.
we're just like fighting over the room. But we ended up driving to the Amalfi Coast. We did that for about 5 days, and that was my wife's favorite. And then
Oh, yeah. I hear it's beautiful.
we went to Naples for 3 days, back to Rome, and then we flew home from Rome.
Oh, but
So,
that sounds like a great trip other than fitting into the car.
yeah. What did you think of Naples?
So we were just there for one night before we flew out. We didn't have more time. Like I said, our 90 days was up. We had to get out of the country. Um, but I liked it. Yeah, we went along the street. I forget the name of it, but it's like the oldest road in Naples, anyway. Maybe in all of Italy. I don't know, but the old Roman road. And to look at it, it looks like it should be pedestrianized because it's full of pedestrians and everyone has the shopkeepers have their things out on the sidewalk, their wares that they're selling. And yet there's cars then that are going down the street. It's like, oh my gosh. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe it's just one way. Nope, it's two way. It's like, so that's crazy. So I'm glad I wasn't driving there, but really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Europe is weird like that. Um, okay, well, we've already been talking for a while. Time always flies on these, and I really wanted to ask you about you when we talked about some of the topics to cover. One of the things you said was your decision to retire,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to know, like, was that something that you planned out well in advance? And even when the time came, was that an emotional decision, or what all went into it?
Yeah. Well, I'll step back and tell you my story about kind of my entire retirement planning, and then right at the end. Uh, so, as you know, I've worked in the retirement field. I actually, my entire career was in the retirement field. So you might think that I had this well planned path for retirement, but life doesn't always work that way. I was basically living paycheck to paycheck. I would go out and conduct these enrollment meetings, tell people about the power of time and save early. And even if you stop saving later, it'll grow with time. And, that's what to do. So I was lucky to save anything. And then when I was about 40, I got divorced and didn't work for a year. And so what little bit I had in my 401k plan, I ended up spending to support myself. So starting over, then in 2000, I started back into the retirement field and would save just enough in my 401k so that I could get the 4% match or so. And but then I remembered one other time a woman I worked with said she'd gone to a financial planner, talked about how to reduce debt because I had some credit card debt. And she said, take a chunk of money, so whatever it is, for me it was $500 a month, and first pay off, I think is your lowest balance card, pay that off, and then move it all to the next one, and then maybe I had balances on two or three, and it took me, I want to say, I don't remember exactly, but maybe 3 years or so to pay it off and be debt free. So that was one thing that um, I did right. Maybe it would have been more right not to go into debt in the first place, but anyway, that's what I did. And the other thing that I did, I had refinanced my house in about 2000, and so refinance with a 30-year loan. And then a few years later, I my mom's husband was in the mortgage industry. So anyway, he said, well, you could do a 15-year loan and for just a little bit more. So I ended up doing that. So that put me um, in place so that my house would be paid off about the time I was 60 or so. So then I did something that took me back into some debt, but at least they were just federal student loans. But I went to law school. So I was in law school from 2004 to 2008, graduated, and I think that was
Oh,
just like
wow.
32,000 of federal loans. And with those, you pay them off in 10 years. I want to say it was about 400 a month or so. So I thought, okay, well, now that I'm 50, I need, and an attorney, I need to be working at least long enough so that I can pay off my student loans. But it was really at about age 60 when I started thinking, okay, I'm really thinking about retiring. My husband retired, or as he would say, stopped working because he was far too young to retire. He wasn't even 54. And
Oh, good
he
for him.
he was a much better planner than me, and we keep our finances separate, but we're very much in tune with, no debt, pay off our house so that all of we don't need much income, but whatever we do have, it's disposable income. So, so he had stopped working, and so this could do some of these longer trips. Go hike the Space Side or the Cotswolds, and then the pandemic comes. So we got married when I was about 55, ended up buying a home together, and I sold my house. So I had a little bit of cushion. So then I
Yeah.
wasn't so reliant on my paycheck and could just sock things away into my 401k. But early on in my career, I worked in the pension industry. I'd have my HP 12C calculator, do the future value, present value, whatever. And who knew at that time in the 80s, will Social Security be there or not? But I decided, okay, I want to save $1 million. That's my goal. Of course, that's also interest rates were like 10 and 12% in the 80s. And so anyway, but that was my goal. But so I started thinking, okay, when will I retire? I had a cat. I knew I wanted to travel. It's like, okay, my cat is healthy, but probably won't be around forever. But then, poor little thing, she got diabetes, and so we were giving her insulin twice a day. So very much homebound. Kind of worked out with the pandemic to be homebound for my insulin dependent kitty. But
Yeah.
she died, and then I thought, okay, well, that wasn't supposed to happen
I'm
yet.
sorry.
I
That's
I haven't
terrible.
met my goals yet. I've not met my $1 million goal yet. But and then I'd watch Glenn go off kayaking, biking, and I mean, what else could you do in the pandemic, right? There's all social distancing. And kind of about the same time, my doctor said, I'm concerned about your cholesterol. It's pretty high. It's like, okay, so that makes it all the more important to be out there and uh, getting exercise. I had a farm box delivered each week with fresh produce, so I could just
Yeah.
cook all these super healthy meals. So I just, like, more and more, I could just taste it. Like, okay, can I retire yet, Glenn? Can I retire yet? I mean, not that it's his choice, but I trust what he says. It's like, can I afford to retire? And he's like, oh, keep, you need to max out your HSA. So it's like, okay, I maxed out my HSA. Now can I retire? Oh, you need to max out your 401k. It's like, oh, don't do this to me. Anyway, so I did work into 2021 so that I could max out my 401k. And the other thing, we were having our house painted, which because of, not that it's a big house, but the lead-based paint, they need to do all this lead paint abatement thing. So it's like almost 20,000 to paint a house, and they did a very nice job. So did that. Didn't want to have that like as a first expense. Surprise, you retired, and now you
After
have this.
retiring, yeah.
Right, right. So took care of that. Took care of socking away the last little bit into my 401k, and then June 30, 2021, officially retired. And the next day we were out the door visiting family, doing a month-long road trip through California and Texas and Oklahoma where we have family. And yep, haven't looked back since. It's been great. So, didn't quite meet my financial goal, but also Social Security is still around. Hopefully, I will wait until I'm age 70 to take that. The other thing that really surprised me is that, we all worry about, well, healthcare. Healthcare is the big deal. Like, it's expensive to pay for on your own. But because we were able to keep our income low, I mean, even it, you can have income of 40,000 or so, which is plenty. I mean, we have outside savings as well, so not everything we spend is necessarily income. But with the ACA premium tax credit that we get, our health care for 3 years was less than $7 a month. For the two of us was our out-of-pocket cost. So
Wow,
now,
that's incredible.
right? I just turned 65, so the ACA tax credit's not available after that. It's only available for the marketplace plans, not the Medicare plan. So I just went on Medicare, and now my cost is $175 a month. So I'm like maybe one of the few people, my healthcare costs went up, but it also does at least include apparently a membership to my local community center where I can go swimming. So maybe I'll actually start lowering my cholesterol again, working on that, and going to the nice warm pool.
I thought healthcare costs were like 500 to 1,000 a month or something like that. I've always thought of that as the big deal thing.
Right. And they are, without the ACA tax credit. So I think that our plans are about 800 or so a month for each of us. But so, yeah, our tax credit is, you know, 16, $1,700 a month. Our tax
Is
credit
that
is actually more than the healthcare premium. So the only reason we had any expense is that the ACA tax credit doesn't go toward some things that the plan covers.
is that a
So
federal tax credit, or is that like because you're in Oregon or
it's the federal, basically Obamacare, the
hmm.
ACA. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
that's
So
amazing.
so I was very much a beneficiary of Obamacare for three
Yeah.
years.
Um did it change your how did it affect you from like the standpoint of every day you're going to work and you just your mentality is like I got to work today, and then you have your routine of what you do when you get off work, dinner, nighttime routine, and then it's like people take a lot of identity in, well, I wake up early, I work out or whatever I do, have breakfast, and then go to work, and then all of a sudden with retirement it's just over, and you're kind of got all day in front of you. Like,
Right.
what was that like?
Right. I think that probably earlier in my career, I identified maybe, part of my self esteem is all wrapped up in work and everything. But I have such a nice life with my husband, and he never really seemed to do that. Like he had all these other interests, and work was just work. He was a software developer and uh, made a fine living, but I think he enjoyed it for the most part, but it was just work. And, he could leave it at the door. And I don't think his self image is all tied up into it. And so, anyway, I started unraveling a little bit from that as well. But I did at first, I was very gung ho with my swimming routine. So I would wake up, have my coffee, go to the pool, and very much into researching new recipes. What can I do with my fruits and vegetables? And go to the grocery store, do my shopping like on a daily basis instead of buying things up front for the whole week. And just like, okay, what sounds good or what looks good at the grocery store, or what new recipe do I want? And then come home and spend kind of a slow cook. So it might take, if a recipe says it takes 1 hour, it's probably going to take me 2 hours or,
Yeah,
and just,
me too.
well, also, yeah, chopping all the vegetables. So some things could be very labor intensive. Like, okay, really, when they give you this butternut squash recipe, are they taking into account how much time it takes to prep this butternut squash into little cubes? I don't know.
It always says prep
But
time like 2 minutes, and that's not
right,
accurate.
right, right. I mean, maybe I need to take a knife skills class or something. But so, it's amazing how for me, that could be a full day. Going to the swimming pool, uh, showering off. Of course, then you're all wet. Your hair's all wet, dry, get all dried off. Basically, get ready all over again. Uh, do my recipe research. And the other thing that I did, very sweet, people from work gave me a retirement gift, a monetary gift. I had this lovely Amazon card, and I got myself a bird bath and some different bird feeders, and um, just I could just sit and watch the birds if the weather's nice, or even if it's not, to watch them from inside the kitchen nook out the back. I just really get a lot of enjoyment from watching the birds and trying to identify them. So I think that one
Yeah,
of the things that the pandemic did for us is, just kind of teach you to appreciate some of the simple things in life.
yeah. When we were talking, you said you were getting into bird watching, and so it sounds like you got into it when you were retiring, and it was like a
Hmm.
new hobby. Like you didn't do it before that.
Right. I'd go down to my sister's house, and she and her husband have some bird feeders, and we're into watching the birds. So it started down there in Sherman Oaks, California, just sitting in their backyard. It's like, oh, this is cool.
Have you ever seen those? They have like window attachments you can put in your house where it like makes your window become a 3D thing and it comes into your house, and then you put some type of bird device in there, and then the bird actually is like in your kitchen and it's surrounded by glass, but you can see it like all sides of it.
Oh, wow. No, I've
Yeah, you'll
never
have to
heard
look
of
that
that.
up.
I have seen some little, I think there might be hummingbird feeders maybe where you can stick them on the glass. I haven't actually tried them, but yeah, that sounds cool. Although if any windows came into our house, our little house would be even smaller. I don't know if we need every square foot we have, but anyway, but that sounds totally cool.
Do you have like the ability to look at birds and be like, I know what kind of bird that is, and like recognize bird sounds and all that kind of stuff? Or
I'm not very good at recognizing sounds. Sometimes I'll think, okay, that sounds like a chickadee because they're a little bit different. Sometimes I'll hear something and I'll think it's a bird. It's like oh, that's a squirrel, or I'll think it's a squirrel. It's like, oh, that was probably a northern flicker or something. It's some kind of a type of woodpecker. Uh, and so mostly watching their behavior and if they're going to a feeder or if they're on the ground. Of course, there's some things like a goldfinch. Okay, I know that's a goldfinch because they're the only like kind of yellow greenish birds that come into my yard. Or there's this other one called a varied thrush. They're orange, but then they have some black on them, and I think it's the male. They have this black ring around their neck, like they have this big necklace on. So there's some that are very distinctive um, that I can recognize, or like a robin. We actually don't get robins very often. Um, and when we were traveling, we'd hear a bird, get out my Merlin app on the phone and hold it up.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that? So I did. There's I think it's the European blackbird, Eurasian blackbird. I think it might be European. Anyway, whatever this blackbird is, uh, beautiful, beautiful song. So when I just would hear something, it's like, oh, that sounds so pretty. I bet that's a blackbird. And sure enough, it'd be a blackbird. So sometimes I get it, but oftentimes not.
Are there cardinals out here?
I don't get cardinals. I don't, it's, to the best of my knowledge, it's not just that I don't get them. I don't know that they're here. I know, like
Yeah.
in
The only reason I bring it
Oklahoma,
up is in Nebraska, it's like a common thing. Blue Jays and Cardinals, and they're bright blue and bright red, and
yeah,
I just got used to it. But now that I've been out here for a while, I haven't seen anything like that. So
yeah. I know my dad was outside of Tulsa and they get cardinals. So I've never seen one out here, but I don't know. That's the cool thing too about the Merlin Bird app. You can click on it and you can see their range, their territory, where they go, where they don't go. It's like one of the
okay,
things, my husband built a nest box, so we haven't actually had a bird use it yet, I don't think, but it has to be a very specific size hole for a bird to get in so that a bigger bird can't get in and you know, damage the eggs. So we made a nest box for a chickadee, and apparently there's a bird down in Southern California, so not a chickadee. I forget exactly what type it was, if it's some type of warbler, but anyway, it needed the same type of hole. So he made a duplicate, and that went down to my sister's house in Glendale, California. So hopefully, if our nest box doesn't get used, hopefully hers will.
did
In any
she
event, they're
was she
just kind of cool
excited?
to look at. She was super excited. Yes, it's
Cool.
very handcrafted with precision detail, all by lovingly by Glenn, my
I
husband.
mean, that sounds like a pretty sweet gift.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Alex and I have some water that goes in our backyard, and every once in a while we'll see a blue heron like looking for
Oh
fish.
wow. Yeah.
And I have to say, it's a pretty big treat for us because in Nebraska, you don't see any birds that look like blue herons, you know?
Right.
It's a huge bird, and then you see deer or whatever. Apparently, there's fish in it, but you almost never see them because it's moving water. So I guess they
Right.
don't. I don't know, but um, yeah, it's a really cool thing just being out here in nature. And I don't know, the Pacific Northwest, and I know you're in Portland. It's like the animals out here are incredible to just watch, and
Yes.
if you can get them into your yard and attract them, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband has a two-person kayak, so sometimes we'll go out to if we head out. I guess it's out east. We can. There's. Well, I mean, wherever you go and you're out in nature, you're going to see some pretty cool things. But there's some places in particular, like out. I guess that's out west towards Scappoose, where it's kind of a bird sanctuary out there. So we've gone out there and seen herons, and like you say, that is always super exciting.
Yeah. Um. Okay, so when we were talking about what we were going to talk about. You had said you've recently started using Ancestry.com, and you had an interesting discovery. So I thought I would let you share that story, and then maybe we can just talk around that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so it kind of ties back into the South Downs hike that my husband did in England, where we started in Eastbourne. My great grandfather on my mother's side, he was from England, and he had he had other family who actually, I think his father, so my great great grandfather, lived in Eastbourne, and uh, one person was an artist there, so taught at this art school. I had this book of his, How to Draw Hands. So anyway, it was cool to be in Eastbourne and with this connection of this English family. But it turns out that through DNA, I discovered, oh, I guess my great grandfather is not actually my great grandfather, because all of that side is English Protestant, and it turns out apparently my biological great grandfather is Irish Catholic man from Philadelphia. So it's like, who knew? And we knew that there were definitely untold stories, because my great grandma, she lived to be 100. So she was born in 1889 and she lived to uh, 1989. And my mother was always told she was the only granddaughter. And my great grandfather, he had died in 1949. So my great grandma, had this whole life after he passed away. But because my great grandma and grandpa, they just had the one son, my mother's father, it came as a total shock in 1989 to my mother to find out, no, she's not the only granddaughter. There's another granddaughter, her first cousin, who lives, was from the East Coast. It's like, well, how could that happen? Because it was just my mom's dad. Well, apparently, my grandma and grandpa had two children. The first little girl, dear Myrtle, she was born in 1909. And yet, we look at the census, and in 1910, my great grandfather was married to somebody else. So, how did he have this? In 1910, married to somebody else, but in 1909, before that, he and great grandma had already had a baby. So, I don't things happen. So, a few years later, then they have my mom's dad in 1912.
Okay.
So, come to find out, this his older sister, which no one knew about because the family moved from Philadelphia to Santa Monica, California in 1917. And they only brought their son with them. They left their little girl, Myrtle, at home to be raised by her grandparents. And it's like, this is just all so strange. So, our California side, we all think it's only the one boy and only my mother. But then turns out Minnie had this whole other family on the East Coast. Her daughter, who stayed behind to be raised with my great grandma Minnie's parents. And then, so this daughter had my mom's cousin Carol. So all this comes out. So when I do the DNA test, Carol and I connect and talk to each other on the phone. And she's a wonderful woman, have this lovely conversation for like an hour. And she shares with me, like, here's her mom's birth certificate and everything. So I suppose partly because whatever happened must have been out of wedlock. They had it all documented through the church right away that this, English man with the family in Eastbourne, that was the father. But we always kind of wondered, well, maybe, but anyway, because they had a second kid, we thought, well, surely their second kid, my mom's father, must be legitimate. But so we do this DNA testing, and Carol and I are, of course, connected because we have great grandma Minnie in common. And she connects with this other English woman whose family was in Eastbourne. She connects through DNA with this cousin who's now in Scotland. So Glenn and I end up traveling to Scotland, go meet this cousin outside of Oban. She has us over to dinner on her farm. Lovely evening and everything. But we share our DNA. She pulls it up on the computer. We have no common matches. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not family. You just fed me, served me your elderberry gin that you made, and we're not actually family. But she said, I still get to be family. I mean, that she would be the family that is on the tree that we know that my great grandma tried so hard to cover up for 100 years, right? That, uh, yeah, something must have happened. So also through the DNA, I see that, gee, why do I have all this Irish blood in me? 17%. It always fluctuates with ancestry. They refine things. But today I have 17%, supposedly.
Okay.
But cousin Carol, she's got no Irish blood in her. And then my mom has a half brother. He's got no Irish blood, so the Irish blood didn't come from her mom. It must have come from her dad's side. I mean, 0%. And cousin Carol, 0%. So anyway, through different DNA connections, and then I messaged some of my DNA matches and said, hey, can you tell me about your family, or do you know what your connection is with these other people? I was able to go through and look at census and see where this Irish Catholic family had all been congregating right around the corner from great grandma Minnie. I mean, literally, like right around the corner. So I'm thinking, okay. And it was kind of hard to narrow down because they've all got like 10 kids, but just based on kind of ages, and not all the kids lived long enough. They had to be alive in 1911 for her to have a baby in 1912. But anyway, so it all points to, apparently, I have no connection with England and Eastbourne, where Samuel Pullman or Oliver Sr. Was an artist, apparently. Got Irish Catholic blood in me. So it's all been a revelation. So it kind of remains a mystery. I don't know exactly, but I'll go through and see, is there anyone new? I've chatted with a few people. One man who's younger than me, he's like, well, I'll talk to my mom. My mom remembers things and, knows more people, and he talked to her. And so that's been sort of interesting to find out more about this family. But I guess I'll never know exactly how I'm connected. But I do know that my English great grandma's or grandpa was not actually my blood great grandpa. So just kind of interesting. But I still made some nice connections. And cousin Jill in Oban, Scotland, says I get to keep her, so I'm keeping her.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's wild. It sounds like there must have been some situation, something scandalous going on with your grandfather's mom, because
Yes.
So she has her first daughter, but not with her. Was it with? Do we know if it's with her husband? It was with her husband.
We know it was with her husband because
he's the
cousin
English.
Carol's connected to cousin Jill in Scotland, who is definitely from that English line.
Okay, so we know your great grandmother has a daughter and it's with her husband, and then she has your grandfather, but it's not with her husband.
Three
Does
years
her
later, right?
Yeah, so maybe that's why she moved. But do you have any suspicions if like her husband thought that the son wasn't his? Or do you
No, I'm sure that he thought that he was because um, just of because of the way that he talked, and I have actually through cousin Carol, she's had a copy of the eulogy that my mom's dad gave for his dad in 1949, and um, talking about how he was always like his pride and joy and blah blah blah. So no, he very much, I believe, thought that he was the father of
did
my
you know
mom's
your
dad.
grandfather well? Like, do you remember?
I didn't, because my my mom's parents actually got divorced when she was little. She was like 2. So I don't ever even remember meeting my mom's biological father. I know I did. And even though he was alive up until 1980, I didn't have a relationship with him. And uh, his mom, my great grandma Minnie, scandalous, but she must have been oh so fun, Minnie. She, like I said, was alive until 1989, so I was 30, and I don't recall meeting her other than as a little kid. Somebody had a mynah bird, Minnie with the mynah bird, so we'd go and visit her. But I don't remember her, and she wasn't in my life as I was growing up.
Well, wouldn't it just be amazing to like be able to ask Minnie about this? Because
Oh, I know. So that's the thing. Carol and I, my mom's first cousin Carol, she and I were talking, and uh, her mom had uh, died from cancer, unfortunately. So she passed before her natural time. But so she's like, oh, my mom's best friend. I'm sure she knew all this, but you know, it wasn't until the DNA came out that anybody had any kind of inkling of this. Well, my mom first got the inkling that gee, something was up just because she found out she had this first cousin that she didn't know anything about. Um, so, yeah, I wish I could talk to Minnie, and how tragic that you feel like you have to have this deep secret. But Minnie would go and visit her daughter, and so cousin Carol knew Minnie. She would come, and it was no secret. But on some of the census and the earlier census, it I wonder if maybe Minnie was trying to pass off her daughter as, say, a younger sister. So like, is that why she stayed behind and was raised by the grandparents? Because maybe the little girl thought the grandparents were her parents, and that would be traumatic to be torn away from the people you think are your parents. So who knows? But it just make me glad to be living in a time when you go, yep, I had a child out of wedlock. How about that? So,
well,
and not have to not have it be some shameful thing.
sure, no, and I don't have any shame in my mind about it.
Yeah, yeah,
I just am so confused about why would you leave your non like your child that you have in wedlock behind and take the son that is out of wedlock.
right, right,
It just seems confusing, and I'd be curious like did the biological father know that he had this son, and because it seems like Minnie took the son and left with
right,
the husband and didn't tell her husband and maybe didn't tell the biological father. No one knew,
right.
it seems like.
No one knew. Yeah, part of me wonders, gee, did this little boy look like the spitting image of his Irish Catholic father who lived around the corner? So they needed to leave Dodge, get out of town, and take this little boy. And like I said, but yeah, but why did they leave the little girl behind? And yet it seemed like my great grandpa, I although he's on the birth certificate, I wonder if he didn't believe or he had doubts, if maybe he didn't think the little girl was really his. Or maybe he did and he did it out of love, thinking, the best thing for the little girl is to stay behind with her grandparents. But it's very, very odd.
And it sounds like when you said Minnie went back to visit, like at first I thought, well, maybe it was a long time ago. Maybe they thought, well, it'll be temporary. I'll come back and get her, or I don't know how they were traveling back then. I mean, that was probably a long journey.
Right. That could be. And yet the weird thing is that, so although my mom's parents weren't married very long, um, I think that they grew up in kind of the same community. They probably went to high school together. So she knew she knew about her husband's background. So my mom asked her mom, "Hey, did my dad know he had a sister?" No, he didn't have a sister. It's like, so nobody knew. So I don't think that's why I'm thinking that somehow they lived this life where they kind of rewrote history. And
But so if he didn't know
my
that,
dad grew up thinking, or I mean, my mom's dad, Alva, he grew up thinking he was an only child.
yeah. So that sounds like Minnie was going back to visit her daughter and not even telling anybody that she was doing that.
Right. And I don't know when she went back, like how often. And of course, her husband, Minnie's husband, died in 1949. So, maybe it wasn't until after that that she
Okay.
started going back or so. I don't know. Yeah, it's all one great big mystery. So I have my own little theories. I've written this whole novel inside of my head that may or may not be true, right?
And you said you've reached out to some of the Irish Catholic family members to say, I think we're related.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's out there on DNA. We're related. So I was just saying, hey, do you know how you're related to this other person because you're both, and those people outside of my immediate family, like my uncle, my nephew and niece, it's those Irish Catholic people who are my closest DNA matches. So that's what's kind of interesting too. Um, they come up showing like as maybe a second or third cousin. They're they're even closer in my match than my mom's cousin Carol.
Hmm.
So um, I I don't know. So I mean I did start out by, hey, I think my grandma had an affair with your great uncle. What do you
Yeah.
think about that? But
Yeah.
hey, I'm just trying to understand how I might be connected. So um, yeah, it's
When I did get a
it's a
chance
it's
to
all
go to
mystery.
Ireland, I forgot to talk. When I went to France, we
Yeah.
did like a week in Ireland, and I
Oh wow.
remember um, the people that we met in Ireland like talked about the kind of rivalry with England.
Oh
So
yeah.
it kind of just adds a little bit to the story too. That um, the Irish and the English sort of thing.
Right. Right. I've never been to Ireland or Northern Ireland. So one of these days, usually I'm trying to think of where can I go where there's sun. So if I want to be under gray skies and rain, I may as well stay in Portland. But no, one of these days I would like to go to Ireland. I hear it's a great trip and people are so friendly.
Yeah, I did think they were, and they mostly speak English, so that makes it a little easier.
Right? So you can
um,
understand them even through whatever kind of uh,
accent they have.
accent. Yeah.
Um, Anything else interesting about ancestry? Like you were talking about, you learned some traits about yourself.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
do you believe that kind of stuff?
Well,
It could be true.
um,
I don't have any clue.
you know, I have to say that a lot of the traits on there actually did fit me pretty well. So some
Yeah,
of the things like, oh, gee, you probably have fine hair or blue eyes. Well, okay, that seems more like something that would just be straight up, DNA that you learn in your high school biology class or something. But then some of the things are, oh, you're probably not very good at sports. So hit that one on the head. I'm not very coordinated, that eye-hand coordination. So to try to hit a softball or put the basket in the hoop, nope, not my strong point. Yeah, it did. It said I was night owl. Okay, bingo.
yeah,
I am a night owl. One of the things that it said, and it said I got this from my father, and maybe I just misunderstood how it was meant, but it said something about not being very determined. And it's like, oh, no, that is not right. My father was like the core epitome of determination. And I feel like I am too, sort of like, yeah, I'll I'll be determined to get the lowest airfare flight. I'm going to search this and not give up.
yeah.
So, or if it was at work, I was like, I'm going to solve this problem. But um, so maybe they meant it in a different way. Maybe they meant it more like, oh, you're not very ambitious in terms of making a whole lot of money or, getting ahead that way or something, which I've always felt a lot of pride in my work and want to do it really well. But I never really went after it like, okay, I'm going to try to find the highest paying job and this is where I want to be in 5 years. I was just like, oh, great, I have a job. Oh, good. I'm happy at it today. And okay, some nebulous, like, yes, I want to keep advancing, but it wasn't. Some people come in, here's my plan, here's my 5 year plan, my 10-year plan, and they make it happen. So that definitely wasn't me. So maybe it meant it that way. But at any rate, a lot of the traits were definitely felt like they resonated.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been scared to do it because um I don't know. Do you ever did you said you knew somebody that is like will not give their DNA? Um
Yeah, my husband doesn't want to do it. My
oh
father
yeah.
said he would do it, and I sent him a kit, and then he's like, oh, no. And I don't know if it's true or not. My stepmom told me, oh, he just doesn't want it to come out in case he had a kid out of wedlock or something. It's like, well, Dad, if that were true, that's going to come out anyway because there's going to be some top match for me. Gee, you have a half brother. And in fact, I do have half siblings because my dad remarried and had a second family. So it's like, no, they're going to be up at the top. So it doesn't matter what you do, Dad. But
Okay, but how does it know like what if that person didn't do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like what if the person that is the other family, they haven't done the DNA test, so they wouldn't show up either, right?
well, so like my my half brother did the DNA test, so I'm connected to him. And in fact, it even shows me who's on my mother's side and who's on my father's side. So I guess they can just tell by the chromosomes we have in common or something uh, that he's my half brother through my father. But yes, he'd have to do the DNA test for me to do that. But that's why I'm saying, like, okay, Dad, you don't have to do the DNA test. If your supposed child did the DNA test, then cat's out of the bag.
I do feel like that's there's always a fear of the unknown, you know? It's like I saw something that somebody did it and it like provided the necessary DNA, and then they were arrested for a crime that
Oh,
they had
right,
done. Like they really did
right,
do it.
right.
And I don't have any crimes that I'm like worried about coming to light, but
Sure.
at the same time, I'm just like, I don't need to find out anything. I don't need any bad things to come up. So
Right.
I
I
don't know. I
could,
hadn't even thought about the kid outside of wedlock, but that sounds terrifying. Like all of a sudden, if you found that out.
yep, yep. It happens, but
Yeah.
brave new world. Like I said, the great grandma trying to bury and successfully burying something for, you know,
Yeah. I
80
mean, like,
years, her entire adult life. And then, oh, here we go. With a simple
and
little spit swab. Guess what,
yeah,
Grandma?
it's come to light. Yeah. And, I think you discovered it recently, so she'd already passed away, but, um, I don't know. Like, I'm sure you think a little bit differently about her, and it's not like probably not in a bad way at all, but
Right,
still,
right.
like, I don't know.
Well, and I also found out, so my dad, what got me started in ancestry in the first place was actually to try to um, research my French Canadian history. So I too might be able to have a friend who's from France, but sadly, I haven't even met a friend who's from uh, Quebec area. But I did actually meet one of my dad's cousins, second cousin. I forget if his first cousin once removed. Anyway, what I found out through um, and actually, this wasn't even DNA, this was just researching records on Ancestry and actually writing to a hospital in Boston for some birth records or something, or the city. But my dad's father was one of five siblings, and my dad knew about his two aunts, but he didn't know that he had two uncles as well. There was, because my uh, grandfather on my dad's side, this French Canadian Catholic, had the audacity to marry my Protestant grandmother. So that was it, all ties cut. We don't want anything of that heathen woman. So basically, my grandfather did not have a relationship anymore with his mother, I don't think. But so one of his, one of these, well, it was actually from one of the aunts. So it was interesting to find out that my dad had uncles and done some research on that. But one of the aunts had a son. And then so I was able to meet, one of my dad's cousins through this aunt's offspring. And he came out to Portland from New York. And so we went and had dinner together with my husband. And that was a lot of fun to be able to meet him. And since then, he's done the DNA test. And now it's like he's kind of part of this, our bigger family where we'll write occasionally. He's Facebook friends with my stepmom, so she's not even related to him. But anyway, so it has created some very nice connections.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you learn, like, a very surprising number of people that are distantly connected, but then you just figure out it's a small world and you
Hmm.
do have something in common with, so it's fun. I really love the story where you actually went to England and met the people, and then it turns out you weren't related, but
Yeah.
like you kind of are still related
Right.
in a
We are in
way.
terms of that family history that we
Yeah.
grew up with thinking this is who we are. So very much so.
That
She
had to have
can't.
been kind of a laugh, like when you were there in person, realizing right in the moment.
Right. We kind of suspected it, but yeah, once we could pull up her account and my account side by side and see who we had matches with, and we had zero common matches. It's like, oh, darn it. But I still write to her.
Um, you had said that you're studying languages a little bit, and I heard you mention that you did, was it Duolingo?
Right. So I did the free version of Duolingo for a while, although I think it was early January they had a sale, so I went ahead and um, signed up for that and have been enjoying it. I enjoy doing it a lot more with the paid version just because otherwise you only get 5 mistakes and then you don't get any more tries unless you go to the practice room. And it's like, oh man, I feel so bad about each mistake. So this way I can just make a mistake and go, oh well, doesn't matter. I have endless hearts.
Would you ever do live classes?
Yeah, in fact, today I just signed up for 2 classes, an Italian class and a French class. Um, they're remote sessions through the community college, but I'd also done recently, well, in the last couple of years, I did 2 sessions of French classes, in the classroom with the teacher and other students, and um, I did 2 or 3 sessions of French.
I
So
love.
yeah, so I go there. It's before I've even opened my mouth that will speak English to me. It's like, okay, I don't know. I hear it's in everything, like our posture, just how we hold ourselves, how I don't know what it is. It wasn't just my shoes and my clothing, I don't think. I think it's the whole thing, they can tell. But even if they speak to me in English, then unless it's something like, okay, I'm trying to figure out my Airbnb and how to work
Yeah.
the cable television, then if if they can speak English, they'll speak English. But otherwise, I try to speak anything but English. Like you said, your French friend speaking with the Italian, even though he doesn't speak Italian or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that you're a lifelong learner. Like you went and got your law degree. And now you're doing languages and you're signing up for classes. That's so cool.
yeah. I was going to take a Greek class this summer, but unfortunately, the enrollment wasn't enough for the community college. I don't know how many students they need. If they need 5 people to sign up, and there were only 3 or 4 of us. Because I thought, well, I don't currently have any plans to go to Greece, but if I study it, I'm sure that something could happen, right? I've never been there, so one of these days. But um, yeah, when we went to India a couple different times, I tried to learn a little bit of Hindi, or we went to Germany, so try to learn a little bit of German. I have a dear friend who's quite a bit older than me. She was my college boyfriend's mother, actually, and went to go visit her where she lives in Basel, Switzerland. And it's like, oh, everyone here, they speak 5 languages or so. So
Yeah.
that was when I was about 40, and then went home. It's like, okay, I gotta start taking some languages. So at that time, I took, I think, German and French. And whenever we go someplace beforehand, I'll try to take a class or do Duolingo. I wanted to learn a little bit of Catalan, so what they speak in Barcelona. They speak Spanish there as well, but Catalan would be the first language, or um, the language of, pride that they weren't able to speak under uh, the, the regime, what's name? Or, the died in 1975 or so, the Spanish dictator, having a mind blank. So
Oh,
anyway,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. So when they could speak their language again, there's a lot of national pride with Catalan, and it's kind of has some influences from French, some from Spanish, but it's its own distinct language. So I'd love to learn some of that, but with the pronunciation, my book doesn't have the pronunciation guide, so I'll watch the YouTube here or there. So, and
Are
all
you,
this studying, and I took Spanish in high school and college. I still don't speak anything fluently other than English. So, but maybe if I keep going and doing these month-long trips in Europe, just learn a little bit more and more.
is it, are you, would you say you're like moderately able to speak other languages where you can kind of get by? Or,
Je peux parler un peu français parce que je veux parler la langue de le pays. Vraiment? Oui? Non?
no.
Une bière? Une bière, s'il vous plaît?
Very
Oh,
good. That's
I could,
awesome.
I could get, get by enough to say bonjour, madame. And that's one of the things, too, in addition to learning the languages, trying to learn some of the local customs. So it's very rude, for example, if you just walk into a store, like a clothing store, and start looking around, shopping like we do here, there. You make your eye contact with the proprietor and you say bonjour, and not just bonjour, but bonjour, madame, bonjour, monsieur. So it was a little bit more relaxed in Brittany, but definitely like in Paris last time I was there, you want to be very formal and make sure you have your s'il vous plaît and bonjour, madame, merci, madame.
Really?
And
I,
they don't
man,
just the other thing I thought was interesting, here, like you might be walking down the sidewalk past a perfect stranger, maybe smile or say hi. France, they just think you're playing crazy. Like, you just keep walking. There's none of these little niceties, or if you're at the grocery store or through the checkout, it's not like, oh, hey, how are you today? Oh, how's your day been going? It's like, bonjour, madame. Very more businesslike, much more
yeah.
formal. Right, right.
Our friends kind of, I noticed that they, well, I guess I shouldn't say he because he was always the same, but our friend from America that moved over there, she has this wild, bubbly personality. And then she still does, but I noticed her being more French, if you will, and the way she conducts herself. But she lived there for like 8 years.
Right.
And
So
she
some
is
of that.
fluent and they spoke French, so I think she just kind of, that was kind of her personality, became that, or more so.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Well, and she must have been drawn to it that she went abroad to study and learn the
Yeah.
language, decided to fall in love and stay.
Isn't it, it's kind of like a dream. I didn't know I was going to be in love with Europe until I went.
Hmm.
And but once you go and see it, it's like, wow, like you said that you were in a 400-year-old pub, which is like almost as old as the United States. And
Right,
so you see things over there that kind of blow your mind when you think about how old it is and the history and the culture and all the people that have walked in and out of that place.
right.
It's
And
pretty
just like you
sweet.
said, like Venice, not always been part of Italy. That's kind of, I don't know, all that history and not just the Italian history, but going back, it's it's hard for me to fathom or even follow. I don't think Italy was unified as Italy until sometime in the 1800s, I want to say. And
Okay.
so, yeah, but the history goes back so much further. It is it is amazing, and to be someplace like, wow, look at this old beam. We were at one place in England where we stayed during my husband's walk, and you had to bend bend your head down to get through the old door that came up to about my nose, and uh, the old exposed beams. It's just so like, wow, wow.
this, yeah, I mean, you look at stuff over there that was built so long ago, and you think they could never build that today.
Right?
It would just be like
Right?
this boring rectangular building today, and it looks like hand carved.
Right?
Like it took a generation to probably build this building that
Yeah.
is still standing and basically like hundreds of years old. It's not perfect condition, but it's not like it would look in today's world, you know?
Hmm. Um, I want to get back to Paris because I understand that Notre Dame is reopening quite soon. There was that big fire several years ago and burned
Yeah.
the roof off, and so they've brought back artisans, and I understand doing things like even making some of the tools, using the same tools that would have been used back in the day. So when I was in Paris before the fire, I never actually went inside Notre Dame, but now that I understand, gee, that won't always be there. Next time, I'll definitely, I want to go inside,
Did you
see
walk
all the
by it?
work. We walked by it. Yeah, we walked by it before the fire, and then recently we walked by it after the fire, and had all the scaffolding up and everything. So still attracted a lot of people. Even just being able to stand outside and look at it is all fenced off, but you could still see some of it.
Yeah. Um, I love Paris so much. Um, I proposed there, and
Oh,
um, we had been dating a long time, and she invited me to go to their wedding. So it was Adrian and Guillaume's wedding, and I knew 6 months in advance, and we'd been dating like 5 years. And so I was like, how do I go to this trip? I'd never been to Europe, and I was like, how do I go on this trip and then come home and like it not propose on the trip and then propose here? So it just felt like that would be the biggest missed opportunity. So I didn't. It was kind of interesting because I'd never thought about how I would propose before. And then when I decided, well, this seems like I can't miss opportunity, then I thought about proposing there, but um I don't know. I just like I think my wife probably would have liked the proposal like in the rain on a random day, you know, where it was less dramatic. But I don't know. It just felt like how could I not do it there, you know? So I don't know.
so did you pick a particular spot? Where were you?
Um well, I'll start off by saying we went we went for like 2 days. We did some things in Paris and then we did a week in Ireland. And the reason we did that was because Adrian and Guillaume wanted to do like a bachelorette week in Ireland. They ended up doing it also like the wedding was in Grenoble, and that's where his family's from.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So we got to take a train up there and it was really pretty. But and they did sort of a 1 day bachelorette party. But I guess they knew some people, like they had friends in Ireland that we hung out with that were Irish, and they wanted to do a week there. So we did 2 days in Paris, went to Ireland. Well, when we were in Ireland, Adrian does all the cooking. And so she was making us food every single day and she got sick. And it's just like, it's just her way that she would like get sick and cough and sneeze, but like she doesn't really wash her hands or whatever. And like that's just who she is,
C'est
even
la
today.
vie.
Yeah. And like, I don't care. Her food's amazing. She's just got this way about her that no one really cares, you know? But we did all get sick. And so she
Oh,
was sick first, and then I got sick, and then Guillaume got sick, and then now we're back in Paris, and we're there, have a studio apartment, this tiny little place on the sixth or the top floor in the Voltaire neighborhood. I think it's pretty close to downtown Paris. And you come out of the metro, and you're right there. And we're sleeping basically on an air mattress that always deflates every night. We wake up on the floor, and it's my wife's birthday.
oh gosh.
And I have this whole day planned out. And I wouldn't tell anybody that I was proposing, but I did let them know that something big was going to happen, and they pretty much knew. But I just
Uh-huh.
wouldn't come out and say it. And we were going to do the catacombs that day. So we had to get up at like 7 a.m. and go get in line for the catacombs. And my wife looks at me like on the floor and she's like, I don't think I can make it today. I'm feeling really sick. And I just looked at her like, well, we've got a big day planned. Like, you have to go. Like, you have to. And I think she kind of knew because she told me years later that she saw my car parked out of front of her dad's house like the day before we went on the trip.
Oh,
I didn't know at the time, but she probably knew I had asked her dad.
yeah.
So anyway, she ends up doing the catacombs. Then we get done with that about 11 a.m. and we go to this really interesting sandwich shop where they're like screaming at you and you just point at what you want and they give it to you. And we ate our sandwiches on the way to the metro and we took a train to Versailles and we did the gardens. We didn't have time to do the palace, but we did the gardens. It was really pretty. And some other family that was there for the wedding came too. Then we took the train back, but on the way back, somebody committed suicide, sadly, and they jumped in front of the train.
Mm.
And so we had to take a train back to Versailles, get on a different train, and it caused us to be late. I was really worried. And meanwhile, she's sick. But we end up getting back at like 7:30 at night to their house. And I had planned on taking her out for a birthday dinner. And she was like, okay, I'll still go. So we change real quick. We end up taking a metro by ourselves, and we'd never gone out by ourselves yet because we didn't speak French. But Adrian kind of gave us directions, and we come up. We get dinner at this cafe, and we sat outside. It was really nice. I remember what we got to eat, and then we walked down, and I had pre-bought tickets to take one of those little boats on the Seine,
Mm-hmm.
and we did this giant tour. It went by the Notre Dame and some other fun things, and everything's all lit up. And then it ended at like midnight. It was like 11 or it was either 11 or midnight, but the Eiffel Tower was lit up. But it like right at the end of the tour, it started flashing, like it does on the hour. And I proposed there on the Seine. You could see the Eiffel Tower. We were on the water on the boat, and the whole boat ride. I had my hand in like my pocket. I was terrified that the ring was gonna fall,
Right.
out of my pocket. Um, but I did stand up and propose, and all the people on the boat were clapping, and she was excited. So it was a very dramatic proposal.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but
Wow.
um, she's just not like a dramatic person, so probably not. And looking back, she always says that she doesn't like Paris because she says that the people there are so rude, and that's not who she's against that sort of. She doesn't like that, and she doesn't care. I think I told you she likes the beach, so she doesn't care so much about the beautiful limestone buildings like I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do sort of feel like that wouldn't have been the proposal she would have wanted, but it's still a pretty cool one. So I'm like,
Right. Well, you had the best of intentions. Who would know that you're both going to be sick, that, yeah, there's going to be this horrible incident on the metro, that, yeah,
yeah,
everything was like conspiring against you. So, but you still made it happen.
yeah. And looking back, I think the picture, she looks so happy, and it is one of the like these days that just sticks in my mind, and I think it does for her
Hmm.
too, which is cool. Um, but I don't know. I'll have to like redo something 10 years at the 10-year mark. We're at like gonna
Right,
be at
right.
7 this year, I think. So maybe I'll
Yeah,
do something spontaneous. But
that's great. And I love that you remember what you were eating. For me, I have certain meals where like I won't remember where was I or what I saw, but I'll remember what we ate, So
yeah.
what were you eating?
So she got like a little pasta with tomato sauce, and I got a burger, and then we both got a dessert. I think I got French fries and a burger. She shared some of my fries. I got a Coke. We each got 2 glasses of wine, and then I got a pack of cigarettes like from the guy because we didn't really smoke, but we just wanted them for that night. And so we got cigarettes, and I remember trying to tip the guy, and he was very like did not want to be tipped, and he took a lot
Oh,
of pride in
interesting.
being a
Yeah.
server.
Right.
But like Alex and I served, we were waiters or
Yes.
waitresses, and so that was sort of like part of our industry. But I got a chocolate mousse dessert. I don't remember what she got for dessert, but mine was fantastic. It came in this like dish, looked like an ice cream sundae dish, but it's chocolate mousse and it had like a chocolate thing twisted as a decoration that
Oh,
you could
right.
eat.
Yes.
Um, and it was amazing, and we were sitting outside. It was very like Emily in Paris cafe where you're like sitting outside where all the little tables are right next to each other.
What month was it?
It was on our birthday. It was July 5th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a beautiful summer evening.
Yeah, and it was late. I mean, we left. I think that it was we got on the boat at 11 and ended at midnight. So, we probably left this cafe at like 10:40 at night and ran down to where you get on the boat. We just barely made it. The whole night felt like that.
Yeah. It's a long day from 7 a.m. to midnight.
That's how I felt. Like my life has become more, I think, caught up with me, but back then I always used to just feel like I didn't really care so much about the rules. Like I wanted to bend the rules and life will just always sort of work out. And I really relate to what you were saying, Glenn. He doesn't his identity is not based on work. That's like very much how I am. So I remember going on that work trip, having a professional job and asking for the PTO for 3.5 weeks, and they said no. And me being, it wasn't at Standard or my company, but it was a different company. And I said, well, I'd really like to work here when I get back, but I'm not going to be here during this window of time. And I gave them like 6 months heads up,
Right,
but
right.
they just said okay, and we worked it out. But when I asked permission, they did say no.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that
I
was
know.
just sort of, I don't know. You have to live your life. So,
I worked for somebody who was very intense, very focused on work, and she thought a week was a long vacation, but Glenn and I would go for 2 weeks. You're going all the way there. You want to get used to the time change and everything and take advantage of both weekends on either side. But uh, yeah, so then I thought, man, my next week trip, I'm planning on 3 weeks. How is that one going to go? Eventually, uh, that person retired, and well, I still got to go on my 3 week trips, and now my 3 month trips.
I mean, when you said 4 months, I'm just like, I could only imagine doing something like that. That's got to be amazing.
Yeah, I'd really like to try to figure out a way to have somebody at our house if yeah, I could Airbnb it. But right now, it's so cluttered. It has all our stuff. I'm thinking I would not be very happy if I came and this was my B&B. I'd be like, "What's your yearbook doing out here? Why, whatever." Uh, but so when we were gone for that amount of time, we did have somebody checking on the house, and for the most part, it wasn't so hot that things needed to be watered outside. We don't have any house plants inside, partly for that very reason, or we used to, but they died because we'd got away. Um, so my husband just he locks everything up, turns the water off, turns the well, a lot of the power off, except not the refrigerator, sets up lights to be on timers so that it can hopefully look like somebody's home and stop our mail. So the house is just shut for all that time, but it'd be nice to be able to go for longer. I was looking into, okay, what's the French visa program? You could go for a year, but
Yeah, I mean,
I
would you
wouldn't
do
want to.
that?
Oh, I'd totally do it. Really, for me, the biggest thing is what would I do with the house? I mean, well, yes, can I afford it? That's another question. But what would I do with that house? I wouldn't want everything just to die, or we have hot summers. Somebody needs to do a little bit of watering, or your house just gets musty. I'd walk back home, get home to a house of cobwebs. That doesn't sound very good if something went wrong. So, uh, but that is the biggest thing for me. What do we do
Is
with the
there,
house?
do you ever explore like selling the house and just like constantly traveling or?
I think I'm too security oriented for that. I very much always want to be able to have something that's my own. So I
Yeah.
don't really see doing that.
I mean, I get it. Like, you want to have a place you can call home.
Right, right. So, yeah. But yeah, there's also somebody was telling us about there's home swap things. So we could do something. We could get a storage unit and put our stuff or put it down in the basement, and people could just have the living quarters on the main floor. The basement's unfinished anyway. The only thing down there of any use to anybody would be the washer and dryer. So yeah, could do something like that. Just to plant little seeds, and I blame it on my husband, who a few years ago had said, "Oh yeah, I was looking at this French visa program." It's like, don't even tell me, because then you tell me and I get it hooked in my craw, and now I'm like obsessed. Okay, no, I don't want to be greedy, but yeah. Or maybe we just go, and 3 months is long enough. Go in the spring or the fall. Like to travel in the shoulder season when the weather's still nice, but things aren't quite so expensive or crowded. Because when we were in Rome, it was May, early May, and like, I guess it was about May 10th through the 13th. It was so crowded, so crowded.
Okay.
Like Trevi Fountain, I I'd never seen so many people
Yeah.
around. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, because we were there. Maybe it was 2008 or so when we'd been in Rome last, and sure, there's people, but I didn't remember it like that. It was just crazy. Every place we went, and trying to get reservations for various places, like a Vatican tour, or when we were in Milan, I wanted to see the Last Supper painting, and there's time slots, so you can go in and you have your 15 minutes with the Last Supper, but I wasn't able to get a ticket. So, things are just crowded. Everyone's traveling again, which I guess is a good thing.
It is. I feel like you like you're just nonchalantly like, "Oh yeah, I was here." Like you've been so many amazing places.
Yeah, I have been really lucky. I barely left the country before I was 40. My husband grew up traveling all over. He went with his family. His dad retired at age 47, I think it was. And so he had these great summer vacations where they go for a month, take road trips. I think he's been to almost every state, and he's traveled all over. So it's always fun to find a place that he hasn't been to. He hasn't been to Greece yet, so maybe I'll be the one who gets to go to Greece with him.
And were you telling me about Peru? And do you have an interest in going down to South America?
Oh, that's our friend who just went to Machu Picchu with her
Yeah.
daughter. Yeah. I had looked into doing that one other time. I've not been down there, but people who I know who have gone have said it's amazing.
It looks amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I've started to find some influencers that they'll do like there's this butterfly location in Mexico, and it's like
Mm.
2 weeks out of the year you have to fly to Mexico. You have to like find a tour and start the hike at 2 in the morning, and you make it to this point, and when you get there, it's like there's a 2 week mating season, and there's millions of butterflies in the air, and they make this incredible sound, and there's no other sounds because you're so high up the mountain.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
And I guess also you look up and the sky is almost dark from butterflies flapping around.
Wow.
Um, and so like that kind of stuff, I'm like, I don't know if that exact one is what I want to do, but just stuff where it's not just going and seeing a building. It's like there's a 2 week window and it's difficult to get to it. And
Yeah.
so it's like a big reward if you're willing to do it.
Right.
Um, I'm
Well, one
kind
of
of
the
interested in
things,
that.
yeah, I I enjoy even just going and just being someplace. Like when we were in Tropea for the month, I ran into an American couple who were on a tour and they were there for, I don't know, a couple days. And they're like, a month? What are you going to do here for a month? I mean, there's really nothing to do. It's a small little town. It's got the town and it's got the beach. It's like, well, I don't know, like right now, I'm walking to the grocery store to buy some bread for breakfast.
Yeah.
The bread here is great. Have you had have you made toast out of this great bread they have down at the,
Right.
I think it's Casarecho or something like that. Anyway, so just having a different lifestyle is fun and exciting to me. Being able to go to in France, go to the markets, the open air markets, and uh, the different little towns. And so, anyway, it doesn't have to be anything big or exciting, but going someplace I haven't been and being able to challenge myself with speaking a language is that's enough.
Yeah.
It's enough. Yeah, yeah. But butterflies would be pretty cool. My friend who just got back from Iceland went to see the puffins nesting
Yeah.
area, and there were just thousands of puffins around. So that would be, there are definitely those kind of uh, once in a lifetime type things that are very special. Could make the whole trip worthwhile, even if the rest of the time you're not really doing that much.
I know. When we were in Italy, there was one like really kind of stone cabin place, and when you walked around to the backyard, they just had this picnic table, and it overlooked olive trees. I think they were, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe a vineyard, and it was like there was nothing to do there other than
Right,
just be there and eat some food and visit with your friends, and that's some of our best memories,
right.
But getting outside of the United States and experiencing a different way of life. Um, I don't know. I haven't gone back and done it again, but it, it it was amazing at the time. So I don't know if it was just because it was new and I'd never seen that, or if I would still feel that way. But I imagine I would still feel just as excited just to
Yeah,
physically be there.
yeah. Just that peacefulness, or hearing the birds, seeing the blue sky, feeling the gentle wind. Oh. And when we were there, my brother-in-law, who speaks Italian, who drives 9-person vans around town, he also traveled with his guitar, his classical guitar, because he was playing guitar at his son's wedding. And so we were sitting out at this or I guess yes, we were in Tuscany, overlooking the olive grove, and he's playing his classical guitar and practicing his playlist, and we're eating our caprese salad and sipping on some Chianti wine. Like, oh yes, this is nice.
Yeah. Um. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Oh, Trevor,
Um.
it's great to talk with you, as always.
Yes. I mean, it was fantastic for me. Is was there? Am I missing anything? Is there anything else? Do you have anything you wanted to share before we probably wrap this one up?
No, thank you for asking. Like I said, my life pretty much consists of either just being here, sitting in this chair, or being out and about. And we've talked about all the out and about, and it's not very interesting to talk about me sitting in the chair. So I think we covered it.
Okay. Well, um, It has been fantastic to have you on. If you ever have any desire to come back and tell other stories or just talk about anything new you learn on ancestry.com or the next time you do a big trip or something, please let me know.
Yeah, yeah. And hopefully we'll be able to catch up outside of this. I want to hear all about the conference if I'm not able to be there. And I also need to hear what you have planned for your 10-year wedding anniversary, even though I know you have 3 years to plan. So it's going to be a good one.
Okay, well, I am a big planner, so I will probably start very soon trying to make it. And that's the problem because she's going to want it to be not dramatic and spontaneous.
Oh,
And I'm a
yeah.
planner, so.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things I love to do is research airfares, and I can only go so many places or Airbnbs or what have you. So you tell me where you want to go, and I'll I'll be your travel agent for you.
Okay, that's a deal.
Okay. Okay. All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you so much. I'm honored to be on your podcast.